Hello, my treasures. It's time for day 2 or 3, depending on how you look at it, for the March of the Lich King Hearthstone set card reveals. And today, Blizzard decided to reveal most of the Frost cards that haven't been revealed so far. I think this actually will probably be all of them. So Frost Strike. Frost Strike is a 2-cost Frost spell that requires 2 Frost runes, deals 3 damage to a minion. If it kills it, discover a Frost rune card. Really good removal tool for a Frost DK. It also serves as a way to get additional copies of cards that you might want to have 2 or 3 copies. And because we are going to be seeing a bunch of direct damaging spells in Frost, I think this card will probably see a lot of play as just a way to get access to additional copies of key combo pieces or other removal tools so you can actually deal with your opponent's board. Because you got to remember that the rune card pools are going to be incredibly small because there are going to be 3 types of runes. Thus, you can't have too many cards unless you want to snuff out one of the 3 archetypes for DK on its release, and I don't think Blizzard is going to do something like that, which means you will have easy access to those duplicate cards that you really want. And given the fact that I don't think I've seen a single bad Frost DK rune spell, I think this card will probably again see a lot of play. The next card revealed is Harbinger of Winter, which is a 2-cost 2 attack 2 HP undead minion for DK that requires 2 runes and has the death rattle, draw a frost spell. Because this requires 2 frost runes, I don't think this one will see a lot of play, mainly due to the fact that if you're running a Frost DK deck, you're probably going to have a lot of Frost spells within your deck and nothing else, which means that a card like this won't be consistent on what you actually draw. Though if you can find a way to actually cheese the system by using a bunch of shadow spells or other ways to generate Frost spells and only have 2 key Frost spells within your entire deck, then this might actually see some play. It really just depends on how it ends up shaping up with the other cards that will be revealed and how many of the shadow spells you're going to easily be able to access in a Frost DK deck. Next card revealed is Howling Blast, which is a 3-cost Frost spell that requires 1 Frost rune that deals 3 damage to an enemy and freezes it. Deal 1 damage to all other enemies. This is basically a better swipe, except it's in DK instead of Druid. Much like swipe, you can use this to actually just go face, and given the fact that we have been seeing a lot of other direct damaging spells for Frost right now, I do think this card is going to be absolutely insane. Sure, it doesn't freeze out the entire board, but being able to freeze out 1 key minion is going to be really important, or even just doing the face damage as said before. I'm really looking forward to trying to make a Frost DK deck actually work, because I have been missing that style of deck where you're just going to spam out a bunch of spells to do a bunch of direct damage to your opponent's face. And this looks like a return of that style of deck. It's going to be interesting to see what type of mana cheat that we actually see when it comes to Frost DK, as we have seen some already. And there's probably going to be some neutral cards that may or may not mana cheat too. And we do have some spell damage minions that could easily be ran in some type of deck like this. Alright, for the next card revealed, it is Remorseless Winter, which is a 4-cost Frost spell that requires 1 Frost rune that deals 2 damage to all enemies. Draw a card. Better Consecration. It's really interesting that a few of these cards are basically just a better version of an already existing card in Hearthstone's classic set. I'm assuming something like this will probably see a lot of play. It actually isn't the hardest thing to run because it only requires 1 Frost rune, and it does hit your opponent's face while also giving you a card draw, allowing you to go basically even whenever you do play this card, instead of having to rely on other cards to refill your hand after you use something like Consecration. Sure, we don't have tools like Paladin actually has where they can reduce all their minions to 1 HP, so this would actually be a little bit worse in those scenarios, but at 4 mana, being able to draw a card and deal 2 damage to everything on your opponent's board, including their face, is going to be absolutely strong. The next card revealed is Bone Breaker, which is a 1-cost 2 attack 2 durability weapon that requires 1 Frost rune. After your hero attacks a minion, deal 2 damage to the enemy hero. So we are seeing more weapon support, as I expected after seeing Rune Forging. It would be really weird if Deathknights didn't get a bunch of weapon support, because one of the key features of a Deathknight is the Rune Blade. This is probably one of those cards that might see a little bit of play in some type of Unholy DK deck where you're not actually running all 3 Unholy runes. Outside of that, I don't think this one will see much play in a Frost DK deck, as this doesn't seem to be the archetype that really wants to swarm the field or even be more of a aggro based deck. It seems to be the one that wants to be more of a combo based deck. I do think either way, this card is actually pretty decent. For 1 mana, it has an incredibly good effect, and you can run 2 of them in the deck, and you can also have 2 Rune Forging, allowing you to draw into it. Now for the next card revealed, which is another weapon that requires 2 Frost Runes, which is Rim Fang Sword. That is a 3 mana weapon with 2 attack, 3 durability. After your hero attacks, reduce the cost of a spell in your hand by 1. So this is the mana cheat that I was talking about earlier. We do also have the pseudo innervate in the form of Horn of Winter that we had in the initial reveal, which means a card like this is probably going to be incredibly good too, because we do have a lot of cards that we might want to lower their mana cost by 1 or 2. This does allow you to reduce 3 cards by 1, which means it's actually probably pretty decent overall. Sure, it's going to be a little bit slower, but I think this is probably going to be the default weapon for a Frost DK combo deck, as it does serve that type of deck incredibly well, as Mana Cheat usually does. Something like this is always going to be strong, especially because you can even Mana Cheat this out for 2 instead of 3. The next card revealed is a Death Chiller, which is a 2-cost elemental to attack 3 HP. Minion for Deathknight that requires 2 Frost Runes. After you cast a spell, deal 1 damage to 2 random enemies. It's basically Flamewalker, but for Deathknights instead. I'm really curious of why they thought this was a good card to actually print, because Flamewalker is one of those cards that's just imprinted in my brain, and seeing any card like that, especially if it costs 1 less than Flamewalker, sure, you're not going to get either 4 hits that I think Flamewalker originally gave, but given the fact that Frost DK does seem to have a lot of mana cheat and a lot of really, really cheap spells, something like this could be easily snowball into something incredibly, incredibly frightening. Sure, we haven't seen any other elementals for Deathknights, but I wouldn't be shocked to see some other Frost elementals in a future set or ways to duplicate a card like this. It does have the downside of not having any undead synergy, which is one reason why you might not want to run this card, but I don't think Frost DKs are going to really care too much about a undead synergy. For the next card revealed, it is a Marrow Manipulator, which is a 6-cost undead minion for DK with 5 attack, 5 HP, requires 3 Frost Runes, has the battle cry, spend up to 5 corpses, deal 2 damage to a random enemy for each. So Frost DK doesn't look like it's going to have many cards that actually deal with corpses within the class, and I don't know outside of the hero power if you're going to be able to generate a bunch of corpses as a Frost DK. I do think this is probably a decent minion, but I do think it costs maybe a little bit too much. We also had the Devious Fish Blaster or whatever that did something incredibly similar to this, though this doesn't require you to have anything on your actual board, which might make this card a little bit better than a card like that. And I don't think Frost DK is going to rely too much on minions, so this card might not see any play in the end. It's kind of weird that a card called Marrow Manipulator is going to be a Frost DK card instead of a Unholy DK, since we have already seen Marrow Gar as a Unholy big payoff. Though I do think this probably thematically fits better with Frost DK anyways. It's just a weird name choice in my opinion. The next card revealed is Rim Sculptor, which is a 5-cost, 3 attack, 3 HP undead minion for DK that requires 1 Frost Rune, Battlecry, summon 2 2/1 Rhyme Elementals with Death Rattle, deal 2 damage to a random enemy. So we are going to see a bit of additional elemental support for Frost DK, as I would have expected. To be honest, outside of things like Frostworms, there aren't actually that many undead characters that are Frost-based in the Warcraft lore. So them focusing more on the elemental aspect, it makes a lot of sense in my opinion. I know the Lich King technically uses Frostmourne, but he uses mostly unholy abilities instead of frost abilities. There are a few exceptions to that rule, and we have seen those already in cards. I don't know how much play this one will see in particular. I think it costs a little bit too much or the payoff that you're actually trying to do with it. Though it could be a interesting Frost DK deck where you use Vander as a way to discount all of your kind of expensive minions that have, in theory, impactful abilities. This also does basically give you 3 corpses for the price of 1, but I don't think 2 damage is going to be enough to actually make a card like this that playable, at least not in a Frost DK deck. Maybe in a Unholy DK deck it would fit, where you're using 1 Frost rune, but who knows. Okay, the next card revealed is Repulsive Gigantin, which is a 4 mana undead minion for DK with 3 attack, 6 HP, and the text that reads, enemy characters cannot be healed. Really weird that Frost DK is going to get a card like this. This is going to be really annoying to deal with in a Unholy deck, where I think this will fit a lot better, where you're using 1 Frost rune, as that does seem to be the direction that they're actually trying to push Unholy, where you're not going to try to play a pure Unholy deck. There are a bunch of Frost cards that actually make that deck a lot stronger if you can actually use 1 Frost rune. This does counteract both Priest and Paladin, who like to heal a lot, and it makes me curious if we're going to see other classes wanting to heal a lot, because a card like this is going to be devastating if we actually do. But as it currently stands, it's just really a kind of decently statted minion that you can use in certain matchups to just shut off your opponent's deck completely, depending on what they're actually playing. It also does serve as a counter to Reno Jackson, which is a little bit of a shame. The next card revealed is Might of Minithil, which is a 4 cost, 4 attack, 2 durability weapon with the battle cry spin up to 3 corpses, freeze that many enemy minions. It requires 2 Frost runes, which means you're not going to use it probably in any other deck besides a Frost DK deck, unless you can randomly generate this somehow. But we don't really have any cards that randomly generate weapons in the neutral pool as it yet. Honestly speaking, this is one of those cards that I would think would fit a lot better in Blood DK instead of Frost DK. I get why they went with Frost, because it is freezing your opponent's minions, but this can be used as a way to stall your opponent for additional turns, so you can actually get off your big combo in a Frost DK deck. I don't think this is probably going to see more play than the other Frost DK weapon, but you never know. You might actually want to run 4 weapons in that style of deck. It depends on if they nerf Prince Renethal too, because if they don't, then you could easily run 4 weapons instead of just 2. We do have a lot of Frost DK synergy where you're just going to be doing a bunch of direct damage, and you're not going to really want to deal with your opponent's board until you can actually, by happen chance, also nuke the board by trying to go for your opponent's face. I'm curious if the other DK pools will actually see weapons too, or if Frostmourne will be the only weapons for the other types of DKs. Because there are definitely other DK themed weapons that they could easily add into the game, but I don't know if they want to put them all out in the initial set or space them out for the future. Because there are some characters or some classes where they basically used every single possible lore character in the initial release, aka Demon Hunter in particular, and then they have to just rely on making up new characters for Hearthstone. There are a few cards in the Deathknight set so far that are similar to that. The Overlord card for Frost is also a card that really has no lore to it. Marrowgar technically has a little bit of lore, but he is really just a fan favorite, which is why they actually included him in the end. And some of the other cards similar to the next one, like Lady Deathwhisper, is also just a ICC boss, but she doesn't really have too much lore. She is going to be a 4 cost undead minion for DK with 4 attack, 3 HP, death rattle, copy all frost spells in your hand. Really nice as a way to get additional copies of key cards that you really need. I think you can actually use Frost Strike on this to actually just trigger its death rattle almost instantly. You have an easy way to actually combo out for additional copies of key cards that you want in your hand, especially if you can discount them by some form of manner. I am a little bit curious if we will see some type of death rattle synergy for DK outside of the 3 runes, because there are probably going to be a lot of Deathknight cards that have a death rattle that you want to get almost instantly, and this is definitely going to be one of those. And finally, for the last card revealed, which is probably the most iconic Frost DK in WoW lore, Thassarian, who is a 4-cost undead minion with 3 attack, 3 HP, reborn, battlecry, death rattle, deal 2 damage to a random enemy. And I know, I said he's probably the most iconic Frost DK. Lich King still technically counts, but outside of Lich King, he is probably the most iconic. It's cool to see him actually being added to the game. It is actually incredibly powerful of a card because you can actually get the ability off 3 times per copy of Thassarian that you actually have. Again, he only requires 1 Frost rune, so I think you'll probably see more play in a Unholy DK deck instead of a Frost DK deck. He is definitely one of those cards that is going to be incredibly annoying to deal with if you don't have some type of silence to get rid of his Reborn or Death Rattle, which makes him actually probably pretty strong for that type of unholy deck. It might be a little bit cooler if you had an effect like deal 2 damage to a random enemy per frost spell that you've actually cast this game, or on the turn you actually played him. But I will settle for a card like this. It's a nice little intro card for what Deathknights are supposed to do, where you have Reborn and Death Rattle on the exact same card, and it is a undead minion. What else could you ask for when you wanted a DK card? Alright, so those were all the cards revealed so far. Let me know down below which ones you're looking most forward to actually using. I should have a few lore shorts probably out today. Thassarian is probably going to be the first one, and we'll go on from there. And like always, if you enjoyed the video, please leave a like, comment, and subscribe. Until next time, bye-bye.